He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just looked the officer dead in the eyes and tapped his chest twice. The police dog froze. Then it ran, straight toward what the city had been too blind to see, and when they opened that door, every single person there stopped breathing. The day was heavy, the kind of heat that made the air taste like rust and smoke. Maple Avenue wasn't a place you visited. It was a place you survived. Kids played near broken hydrants. Music blared from windows that hadn't seen paint in years, and on that street, in a corner most people didn't look twice at, stood Jaylen Carter, a quiet 9-year-old with eyes that saw everything. He was small, wearing shoes a size too big, his backpack hanging off one shoulder. He was silent, not shy, not timid, just silent. No one remembered the sound of his voice. Not since the night his mother died. 2 years earlier, Jaylen had watched his mother, a nurse, a woman who spent her life saving others, fall victim to the violence she'd been trying to escape. A stray bullet, a dark alley, and the wrong place at the wrong time. Since that night, he hadn't said a single word. Doctors called it trauma. Counselors called it selective mutism, but Jaylen just called it quiet. Quiet kept him safe. Quiet made him invisible, and in Maple Avenue, being invisible was how you stayed alive. It started a month before the incident. Jaylen had noticed men moving crates into the old laundromat at night. No customers, no lights, just shadows and whispers. He'd watch from his bedroom window, sketching what he saw in a small notebook, cars, faces, tattoos, strange symbols. He didn't understand it all, but he knew something was wrong. And then, one night, he saw them drop a duffel bag, long, heavy, and wrapped in black tape. The next morning, the smell drifted through the alley. It wasn't trash. It wasn't food. It was chemical. Sharp and bitter. Jaylen didn't need words to know it was dangerous. By the time Officer Mark Daniels arrived, it was almost noon. He'd been with the K-9 unit for 15 years, hardened, calm, and tired of dead ends. At his side was Rex, a seasoned German shepherd who could read a heartbeat faster than most people could read a room. The call had said, "Suspicious activity. Abandoned building. Possible narcotics." But when Daniels turned the corner, what he saw wasn't a gang or a deal. It was a small boy standing perfectly still, staring at the alley. Daniels slowed his steps. "Hey, kid," he said softly. "You lost?" Jaylen didn't blink, didn't move. He just lifted his hand and tapped his chest. Once. Twice. Rex froze. Daniels' breath caught. That was a search signal. One only police K-9s were trained to recognize. But this boy, how could he possibly know that? Daniels unclipped Rex's lead. "Search," he whispered. The dog darted forward, past the boy, past the dumpsters, and began barking near a set of rotted crates behind the laundromat. Daniels rushed over. He shoved aside a box, and what he saw made his stomach twist. A duffel bag, torn open, spilling bricks of white powder. Cocaine, stacked like bricks in a house made of destruction, but that wasn't all. Beneath the bag was a folded tarp, and under it something worse. A handgun. A wallet, a hospital ID tag. The name on it was his mother's. Daniel's blood ran cold. He looked at Jaylen. The boy hadn't moved. His eyes were locked on the bag, his face pale. Daniels crouched down. "Jaylen," he said gently. "Did you know this was here?" No answer, just one tear, small, quiet, and unstoppable, sliding down the boy's cheek. The news spread within hours. The drugs, the weapon, the missing nurse's ID. It all connected to a trafficking ring that had been haunting the city for years, and the person who led the officers there, a child who hadn't spoken in over 700 days. Detectives searched through Jaylen's drawings, the notebook he never let go of. Each page was a map, a clue, a piece of evidence. License plates, faces, patterns. He'd been collecting it all, silently building the case no adult had the courage to. They realized something chilling. Jaylen's mother hadn't been a random victim. She'd been silenced for knowing too much. And now, her son had finished what she started, without saying a word. When the police raided the laundromat's basement, they found more than drugs. They found a network, fake IDs, burner phones, stolen hospital supplies. A web of corruption that reached higher than anyone expected. It took months, but when the arrests came, it felt like the whole city exhaled at once. And at the center of it all, a boy with no voice, and a dog that understood his silence. A few weeks later, the department held a ceremony. Reporters filled the room. The mayor gave a speech, but when they tried to hand Jaylen the microphone, he just shook his head and knelt beside Rex. He tapped his chest twice, that same silent signal. Rex wagged his tail, sat down beside him, and leaned into his shoulder. The audience fell quiet. Even the officers, men who'd seen everything, stood in awe. Daniel smiled, pride softening his tired face. "He doesn't need to talk," he said. "He's already told us everything we needed to hear." Months later, Daniels received a package. A plain brown envelope with no return address. Inside was a letter written in careful, childlike handwriting. "Officer Daniels, I still can't talk, but I'm learning to draw louder. My mom said being brave doesn't mean you yell. It means you act. Thank you for listening when I couldn't speak." From Jaylen. Underneath the letter was a sketch. Daniels and Rex, standing in front of the laundromat, with sunlight breaking through behind them and in the bottom corner. One line that made Daniels tear up: "Silence can be louder than a gunshot, if someone cares enough to hear it." A year later, Maple Avenue looked different. The graffiti was painted over. The laundromat had been turned into a youth arts center. And in the middle of the building, hanging above the entrance, was a mural. A boy with his hand over his chest, standing beside a German shepherd. The words below read, "Courage needs no sound." Every morning before school, Jaylen stopped by. He'd stare at the mural, his fingers brushing over the painted dog's fur, and one day, as Daniels walked by, he heard something he'd never expected. A small voice, quiet but strong. "Good boy, Rex." Daniels turned. Jaylen was smiling, for the first time in years. He'd spoken. Sometimes the bravest people aren't the loudest ones. Sometimes the ones we overlook, the small, the silent, the broken, end up saving us all. Jaylen's story isn't about a boy who couldn't talk. It's about a world that finally stopped long enough to listen. If this story touched your heart, tell us where you're watching from, and remember, courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers and changes everything.